So I'm going to start off with some humor, more or less. Huh? No, not yet. So I was at I forget what day it was. I was at a meeting, and I go every single Wednesday. I go and meet with some other business people from the Edwardsville area, and it basically is a networking group. And when I first joined it back in March of, I guess it would have been 23. I wasn't quite sure what it was, what I'd be getting myself into, and long story short, I ended up actually profiting quite well from it. I've met some new people, I've gotten some nice referrals for the business and such, and it's turned out a good opportunity. But the only reason I'm telling you that is because I was with some of the other insurance agents in that group, and they asked me if I want to go golfing. And I was like, well, I suppose so, sure. And I know everybody in this church just loves golf so much, so I'm going to talk about that today. But the reason for that being is I told my dad, I was like, hey, are we doing anything Sunday after church? And he goes, no, I don't think so, other than, perhaps visiting Grandma, Grandpa, Clarence, and Mary. And I go, oh, okay, well, I'm going to golf that day. And, well, time came around, and he goes, well, Sam, you're speaking that Sunday, right? And I was like, oh, you're right, I am. And I'll be fine. We have plenty of time, but I made the joke. I said, well, I guess I'll just make this extra short. But one thing led to the next, and I was like, well, the first thing that came to my mind was I spoke on metaphors last time I was here, and I actually put together a little bit of a funny golf metaphor in comparison to Christianity. And in golf, there's many different things, and you're actually going to learn a little bit about it this morning, in addition to the Bible. And I was thinking about how I could draw a parallel between this funny scheduling issue that I put together and when I talked this morning, and this is kind of what I have. Now, I want you to think, as I'm going through this and talking to you about this morning, I want you to think about the challenges that we might face in life. Nobody starts at the same spot, nobody ends at the same spot, and nobody has the same pathway through the whole experience. And that reminded me a lot of a golf course. So if you can put that up. My title is Navigating Life's Fairways. And I chose this because a golf course is very similar to people's lives. No golf course is the same, no hole is the same, and there's no combination of hazards that is ever replicated, even on the same course. If someone mows it that morning and they didn't mow it the week before, the grass will play differently and things. So I'm going to start off by talking about how a golf course can compare to an individual's starting point in life. So in golf, typically, almost always, you will see three different types of holes on a golf course. You will see a par 3, a par 4, or a par 5. And what that means is that is how many strokes it is expected to be able to put it in the hole. Now, I will tell you, I very rarely am able to achieve that. I'm not a great golfer. But you can think of that if we look at the par 3. It is a hole that is only supposed to take 3 shots for the professionals. And you can look at that similarly to someone who perhaps was born into church. They were born with a good family, a good Christian family that encouraged them to live for God, move forward, and they had a very good foundation that they can hold themselves on. And I think of us. We were born into Christianity, and we were encouraged, and we are where we are today. If you pull up Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 through 9. For by grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. So we, if I think of our lineage, I'm adopted, but nonetheless for you guys, you were all born into a family, Grandma Maybelle and Grandpa Paul, that immediately off the bat wanted us to serve God. God put you all in a very fortunate position. And that is not something for us to boast on, but rather for us to be thankful that God did not put us in a family. Each and every one of us could have had a completely different situation. And just like starting at a par 3, it's a short hole. Usually they're about 150 yards, something in that range, or even a little bit less or more. It's an easier place to start off on. Now, it might be expected that we are supposed to only take 3 strokes to get to the finish, to the hole, But it's important that through that we don't get distracted and we don't maybe veer off the path of righteousness that we would want to otherwise be on. But it's important to really understand that God's grace is a gift. It's not something that we should be boastful or proud of. It is only through his mercy and through his grace that we are given the fortunate situations that we are given in life. Now, if we look on the flip side, we look at the challenge of a par 5. A par 5 is supposed to take you 5 strokes to hit, or not to hit, to get it into the hole. And usually in that instance, there's some more challenges that we might face. The first thing that comes to mind is Timber Lakes. It is, I believe it's just under or right at 600 yards that you're supposed to hit that ball in only 5 strokes. It's a very difficult thing to do. There might be challenges in the way. Perhaps you weren't doing things correctly. And the parallel we can give to that is people who were born into a very sinful family, not a good family. People who really didn't know God, who were not given the introduction at a young age. And I think of that similarly. But if you pull up James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4. My brethren, count it all joy when ye fall into divers temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. But let patience have her perfect work, that ye may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. So if we have somebody come to this church who, if I did have an example, I don't think I'd necessarily give it. But if you can think of somebody who is a Christian now, that was not at all at one point in time. They were born into, as I said, a family that was not worried about God. They'd never heard about God. But now, today, they are here in God's house with the rest of us as part of the church. Those people, it is important, and obviously, since we're not in their shoes, one might say, well, who are you to say this? But it's important that those people do not get jealous of us, that we were born into a better family, perhaps, a more Christian family. It says, count it joy when you fall into diverse temptations, knowing that this is trying your faith, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. So those people who have come through it and come out on the positive side, in the end, they have a completely different story and testimony than we do. I think I mentioned this in one of my prior messages, they will have a completely different ministry that can help others who are going through what they were going through. And I kind of think it as a segue. One person who has been through this experience can help the person who's now going through that same experience that they once did go through. But to go back to the golf, just as a par 5 will face you with longer and more challenges, and you'll have to concentrate longer, you'll have to take more thought into what a small mistake can do and maybe knock you out of bounds. It's important that we recognize that, there are those people who were not born into a family similarly like us. And we need to understand that it's not so much that, they don't want it good enough, or they aren't trying good enough. Perhaps they're just dealing with something that we want, or we should strive and want to better understand so that we can bring them into God's house. But through that experience, it perhaps can give someone more spiritual endurance. The person who did that, if they hit a bump in the road, they might just drive right over it. I was thinking, this actually brings to mind, when me and Colton went riding on Friday, I was going over some logs on a motorcycle, but it wasn't able to be done on his four-wheeler perhaps. Since, different people can do different things because they've been through it, they can have more endurance. We need to make sure that we who were born into the good family and born into the good culture, as soon as we hit a bump in the road, we don't just fall apart and be like, oh my gosh, this is terrible, and then we veer off and fall to the temptation. We don't go straight through it and rely on our faith. So that's kind of what the Saul is being based off of. There are people who were born into similar situations as us, who have always known God, and then there are the people with the challenges. Now, through this experience, we will all face, as I said, bumps in the road. And in golf, that's called a hazard. And I tend to find the hazards very easily. But in golf, there's bunkers, there's water traps, there's the rough grass that is a thicker grass, harder to hit the ball out of. I will say, though, sometimes the rough grass can kind of prop it up for you, similar to a tee. So sometimes I can actually hit it better out of the rough. But that being said, there are the challenges, and these are similar to the game of golf. But as we, let's see here. If you think of a bunker, the ball kind of digs in the sand. It's hard to knock out, and sometimes you hit it in the sand, but you don't hit it right, and you might hit it in the sand again because you only hit it about a foot. But if you pull up Psalms chapter 37, verse 23 and 24, the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delighteth in his way. Though he fall, he shall not be utterly cast down, for the Lord upholdeth him with his hand. So we might be caught in instances where we are set back and we are not in the perfect situation that we wanted to put ourselves in. It's important to ask ourselves, how did we get there? Did we not follow the instruction? Did we not rely on the obvious path that we should be following? Did we take a risk maybe where we shouldn't have? Or maybe even used the wrong club or hung out with the wrong people? There's parallels there that we can look at, that when we are going through life, it can very easily, if we want to actually reflect with an open mind and not be in denial of some things, we can see pretty clearly, that's where I made the mistake. There's been plenty of instances where I might be stuck behind some trees or maybe in some trees, and here I am in the trees in the first place, but I think that I can hit it between two trees. Well, I usually don't. I usually hit one of those two trees and it goes backwards. But you don't want to do that in life. You don't want to be like, oh, I can just do it all on my own. I don't need to, take the route I know I'm supposed to. I can just go through this and it'll be fine. It's not always going to be that way. You might get lucky, but it's not always going to be that way. Now let's look at water traps. And we can take them as moments of doubt and fear. If you pull up Isaiah chapter 43, verse 2, it says, When thou passest through the waters, I will be with thee, and through the rivers they shall not overflow thee. When thou walkest through the fire, thou shalt not be burned, neither shall the flame kindle upon thee. So waters are many times in the Bible referred to as like a hurdle or like a troubled time. We see the story of Jonah and the whale. He was not going the direction that God was wanting him to go. How did God take care of that? Raging waters. And that was just one of those instances where Jonah wanted to do it his own way. He didn't want to do it the way of God. And look where that got him. Now, I'm not saying that every single time I hit it in the water is because I'm not following directions. Sometimes I'm just bad. Usually it's that I'm just bad. But nonetheless, there is a little bit of a parallel there. And whenever I'm right in front of a water trap, that is a little scary, because if it's a big one, well, typically I tend to get in my own head and hit it the completely wrong way, thinking I can do something that I can't. But it's important to understand that God has promised that He will be with us through troubling times, through troubled waters and such, and that He can be there for us. And I mentioned this earlier. You can have rough patches in life, just like the rough grass in golf. Please pull up 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9. And he said unto me, My grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. So, when we are in a difficult patch, we can rely on God, that we can rest upon Him. It says there that the power of Christ may rest upon me, that we can hold in confidence that through the troubled times, Christ is there with us. Back in the cartoons, and I remember I used to watch it when I was at Grandma Maybell's house. I would always watch, what was it called? I think Boomerang was the channel or something. And every once in a while they'd have the animation of the devil and the angel on the shoulder. Well, obviously we never want to listen to that shoulder that has the devil speaking to us. We always want to listen to the angel, to God speaking to us. And similar to that, when we are going through that rough patch in life, it's important to listen to what we know is the correct thing to do. In golf, whenever I'm in the rough, sometimes usually that's actually when I'm in the trees, but you have a choice to try and hit it through and just act as if you're going the way that you're supposed to, basically, if you're in a good spot. Or you can do what's called punching the ball out. You can just kind of give a small knock. You're basically throwing a stroke away, but you're doing it so that you can then be in a better position. You can be actually in the fairway. But that's essentially kind of what that is. Do you think that during that rough patch you're going to just try and power through all on your own, or is it good sometimes to take a step back and realize that maybe I should do things this way? And an example of that in life could be maybe somebody who is maybe not as consistent with God. Maybe they're kind of on a Sunday morning like, I don't want to go to church or something, and they find themselves in a rough patch. Do they put themselves in a spot of denial and be like, oh, I can get through this. This isn't because I'm not going to church. It's because I'm just doing this wrong or doing this wrong. Or should they be like, well, maybe this is the incorrect approach to this. Maybe I should go back to the way I once was. And then from that point forward, be in the fairway, no longer in the rough. Because typically speaking, well, at least for me, if I'm in the rough and I try to power my way through it, since I'm already closer to the out of bounds mark, where do you think I normally end up? Out of bounds. And then I lose the ball completely. So I don't know what a parallel would be to losing a ball, but I don't think I really want to go there because that would be pretty bad. But yeah, that's has to do with the hazards. Now, I've kind of been referencing this a bit, and one of the most difficult things for me is in golf is understanding my yardage and how far I should, and which club I should use. For those of you who don't know, you have your drive, I call it your I don't know, I actually don't know what the proper terminology is, but you have like your driver and your 3-wood, your 5-wood, your 7-wood. Those are clubs you usually use to hit off of the tee whenever you're first starting. Then you have your irons, they go 1 through 9. And each of those clubs are bought and given to you so that you can hit the ball at the correct distance based on where you are in your life. Not in your life, on the course. So a 8 iron is made to go less distance than a 4 iron. An 8 iron has more of an arc to it, whereas a 4 iron is more straight. The lower the number, the lower the arc. The higher the number, the higher the arc. And there's actually dedicated degrees to what those numbers represent. But nonetheless, how do you know what club to choose when you're on a golf course? You know what club to choose based on your distance. They make a tool called a rangefinder. How do you know what step to take in life when you can't see the future? That's a difficult thing to do. Pull up Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 through 6. Please. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. So we could talk about that topic for a very long time. We could talk about it, honestly, for several Sundays' worth of a message. And I think the interesting thing here is all of us in our lives have had to have that conversation with ourselves. What are we really wanting to do? And something that I've found very interesting lately, and it's given me a very odd sense of peace, and maybe it's not an odd sense of peace, but I've been very busy lately with going places, not like traveling, but with going to appointments, going to different events, things such as that. And it's really been, stressful at times if I'm running late or if I'm running early. And with obviously driving a motorcycle isn't the safest choice I've made in my life, but I realize that it's important to, whenever I am riding my bike, to take a wise path. Do I take the highway? Do I take the country road? And I weigh those things because at night, I actually prefer to take the highway at night because there's so many deer on the country roads. The odds of a deer popping out on the highway are, I would say, lower than one of the really dark country roads, such as 159 and such. But there's decisions you have to make in life. And what I've been resorting to recently is if I get some weird feeling to take a different route, I'll just take the different route. I don't know why I had the weird feeling to take the different route, but in many cases I think to myself, well, maybe that was that small voice telling me to take a different route. When you think to the story with the Bertles girls, and Tori Carroll was the other girl, who just were going on a casual drive to St. Louis to go shopping, and they got in that accident on the highway, and unfortunately the 3 of them did not make it, and that other girl as well didn't make it either. So you might be just going about just a casual daily task in life, and you never know what might happen. And I never take 159 to go to SIUE. I always like to take the highway because it just is, in my opinion, an easier drive on my bike. But last time I went to Campus Ministries, this past Monday, they started back up just now, which Joseph and Joshua, you guys are welcome to join. But I decided to take the country road. Usually my navigation never tells me to take the country way. It tells me just to take 55. But I was like, you know what? That's odd. I guess that's what I'll do. And that's what I did. So I've done things like that where I just blindly will go off of a feeling that I got and go from that way. So you might be asking me, how on earth does this relate to golf? Well, that really does not, and I'm I'm going to get there. Now, I didn't know what to title this sermon, and I didn't title it this because I thought it sounded silly. I thought it made God look small, but that's not what I'm doing here at all. But my subheading to this section is God as our caddy, our golf caddy. Now, I will never be good enough in my life probably to have a caddy in golf, but does anybody know what a caddy is? Someone share. Well, okay. Yeah, takes care of the clubs, chooses the clubs, and tells you what to do. He's the one that uses the range finder and other things. Will research it, give you advice and such. So it's important to have a good caddy in life. So my whole point of this message in reality is that God is basically our caddy. So who wants to do an activity real quick? Who would like to volunteer? Well, he's got an idea already of what I'm doing. I can't choose you. You're out of it too, Daniel. Let's see. Who's got the best mustache? Come up here real quick, Mark. And I will say, I know that I am not supposed to say this, but I really like your mustache. Go ahead and stay down here. Okay, so this is what I'm going to use my prop. Okay. So I want you to putt this with a football. Try it. I'm supposed to hit that? Yes. All right. I forgot you're left-handed. That really was productive, wasn't it? No. Okay. So now, I want you to try it with this. And I do need a different grip, but.
There is an incline right there.
Oh, there is? Well, hey, there's inclines on golf courses too. Oh yeah, that's the wrong side club.
I'll be all right.
Hey, there you go. We should round of applause. So anyway, I was a pretty bad caddy when I gave him a football, wasn't I? Well, God won't give you a football to hit a golf ball. He'll give you the proper tools. Thank you, Mark. So yeah, well, Mark hit a hole in one, so good job. But yeah, so in life, there's things that we will do and challenges that we will face. And the odds are that if we are only relying on our own intervention and our own knowledge, we probably won't do very well. So in that instance, we should rely on God to give us the correct tools, the correct mindset, the correct vision. And bring up Psalms chapter 32, verse 8, please. I will instruct thee and teach thee in the way which thou shalt go. I will guide thee with mine eye. What better set of eyes or eye would you rather have than God's eye to guide you? And just as a caddy in golf, which I wish I would have one today, but I won't, but just as a caddy in golf would advise the correct approach to take, the correct technique, tell you the wind, tell you the distance, and so on and so forth, God can give you similar insight. And it's important to not just sit and wait, but sometimes you need to advance yourself towards finding out those things. That can be standing up in church and raising your hands during worship, or it can be a simple prayer, reaching out to God to help you with knowing how to look at the situation and how to approach the situation. So bring up Isaiah chapter 30, verse 21, please. And thine ears shall hear a word behind thee, saying, This is the way, walk ye in it, which ye turn to the right hand, and which ye turn to the left. And also bring up the next one, Philippians chapter 4, verses 12 through 13. I know both how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I am instructed both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And the point of that basically is to be faithful to God, to be that advancing force in your own life, to want to get closer to Him. And regardless of whether we find ourselves in actually we can even just call it a challenge in life. That could be a par 3 or a par 5. No matter what situation we find ourselves in, it all is the same. We should approach God the same way. We should be faithful to Him the same way. We read the same Bible. And while different people might be affected by the Bible in their own personal way that helps each and every one of their lives, we must recognize the significance in that. The Bible is put together to help many of us, not just one of us in one certain situation. It can be there for us all because it is a living, breathing book as the Word of God. So, I will admit, I thought this would take a little longer than it did this morning. Mark, you should have taken more tries to hit the water bottle. But the main point of this just is, there's many of us who, even in this room, were put in different situations. Some of us were born into a family naturally. Some of us were not. We haven't really faced many trials and temptations. I mean, we could go on and on and on that many of us have had good situations. Many of us have had bad situations. I've had struggles that Joseph hasn't had. Joseph's had struggles that I haven't had. And we could just say that for each and every one of us. But in many cases, I'm just kind of pulling this out of thin air, but Christy could be a mentor to Victoria, who becomes a mentor to Jenna, and then Jenna to Julia, and so on and so forth. So it's important that we all be there for each other, understand that each other are different, that we all are different, and be understanding to one another, and have that open ear to listen to God as our caddy, more or less. So that's really all I have this morning, but as I close, I would just encourage you all to be consistent in wanting to listen to God, but also be open to hearing others' stories and situations, because perhaps someone that you don't think could help you in your walk could help you in your walk, and we should always be willing to experience that.